Welcome to Agile Talks on Tuesdays with Agile Gurus. I'm your host, Rahul Kataria from Agile Gurus. A little bit about myself. Been in Agile and Scrum, RTE, and a coach role for about a decade. And today we have our two coaches from Agile Gurus, Rhea and Anand. Rhea, can you talk about yourself a little bit?
Sure. Hello, guys. Oliver again. A lot of you already heard what I had to say last time, so I'm not going to go into too much dive. But I've been in the Agile space for close to 10 years. I'm a coach. Mostly, I identify myself as a transformation coach. I've been with Agile Gurus for over about 2 years, right from the inception. Been coaching for about 6+7 years, been a trainer, been a speaker. I speak at a lot of conferences, and I'm excited to be here. And I'm accompanied by Anand.
All right, thanks, Rhea. So, hey, folks. Some of you might know me. I taught classes for you through Agile Gurus. Been a part of this Agile Gurus movement for about 2 years now. A little about myself. So I've been doing this, for a long time. So, and I've been, training for about 10 years. I'm mostly an enterprise product and Agile coach. I help large organizations find their inner agility. And I don't believe in any particular way of doing Agile. I believe every organization will find its own unique way of being faster, better, and customer focused. So that's sort of my core beliefs. So let's get started.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. So our first question today, and I'll talk to you about this. With remote collaboration being the new norm, can you take us through some quick highlights of each of the team level Agile ceremonies and what should be the expectations?
Okay, great question. So with the new norm of being remote, which is not being co-located with your team members, so there's a lot of things to consider before you do even something as simple as a stand-up. So the first thing as Scrum Masters that I would ask everybody to consider, and I do this for myself as well, is you need to have a core set of norms for every team that you operate in, right? So you have to work on your norms, and norms could be basically your beliefs written down, like, respecting each other's time, always showing up on time for meetings. If you're not going to be there, using something like Slack, as far as tools go, using something like your Slack or your instant messenger. I'm not a big fan of these local, like the company IMs, because the messages evaporate. I like Slack because the messages persist and you can create channels for yourself. That's a little tool tip. So create those cultures, create those norms first before you do anything. And then one of the first things I noticed that's almost common for all unsuccessful teams is they don't have norms. They don't have these things kind of written out. And because they don't have it written out, nobody knows how to play. So first things is norms. If you don't have them, create them. If you have them, it's time to revisit it now. With this new context, you have to kind of bring everybody back to the table and say, do these norms still hold good, right? And you have to kind of create these new, as Reha would say, working agreements, like small functional working agreements on, does this stand-up time work for everybody? You used to do it at 9:30 or whenever. Take that moment to ask them again, does 9:30 still work? Maybe it doesn't. And have that empathy to ask that question. Don't assume that it still works, that what was working 4 weeks ago is still in play now. So have those questions. Be sort of the leader who is empathetic towards where people are. And then work on your norms and your agreements, your working agreements, and then something as simple as stand-up. So I'll just kind of walk through stand-up as a startup. So stand-ups, again, I would recommend that people come and show up on video, right? So create a norm around you have to show up on video. So that shows a level of commitment to that meeting. And it shows a level of commitment to the rest of the people, right? So I don't know what your norms are, but typically 9 out of 10 teams have respect as one of the norms, and that shows that respect. Like when I showed up, I saw you in your face, like I looked okay. And so if you're using Zoom or what have you, have them turn on the video and do look at each other, say that quick hello, and start. right? So that's a good thing for stand up. And, normally we would just write stuff on the whiteboard for parking lot. What do you do now? You can do anything for that. Like, if your company uses Google Sheets or something like that, have a running list, a document that everybody has access to, name it appropriately, and collect your stand-up material there, and be transparent with that. But yes, we said we would park lot 4 items. We only got a chance to get to 2. So, and then as a Scrum Master, you have to figure out a time to kind of weave that conversation back. So stand-ups are very, very important. One of the first things that suffers that I'm noticing in this new context is the stand-up, right? So because some people don't want to talk and don't want stand-ups, and this is a great excuse for them to tap out, right? So bring them back in, right? And because we are going to go back to work, it's not this gravy train stops sometimes. So you don't want to rebuild all those habits. So don't break too much of your habits. I'll move on to the next item. The next item for me is planning. The Three Amigos planning or the general team planning. There's lots of tools online for poker planning where everybody can sign in and quickly point. We'll try to, at the end of this call, we'll try to add a few of those tools on here for you that are free that you can use for poker planning. But again, same thing. Now planning will be sort of similar, but as a Scrum Master, I would expect you to really focus on the Three Amigo planning. If you don't know what that is, do a quick Google search, you'll be able to find it. It's where your tech lead, yourself, and your product person sort of come and prepare to run the planning. So what I'm advising a lot of people at the program level, portfolio level, or team level, it's the same, is you can't have those fluid conversations like you would in your old planning meetings, like you just bring people into the room and just like start talking. That's not going to be as effective over Zoom as it was when everybody was in the room. Does that make sense? So like you have to spend a little bit more effort to pre-plan, come in with those 4 or 5 skeleton stories to quickly have the conversation with the team. And so there's no necessarily tool for this, but this is a process. So be ready, have the pre-planning meeting with your folks, come in ready, and then expose those pre-planned stories to the team so they can read it at their own time and be ready for it when the actual planning takes place. So you can quickly poker plan, ask a few quick validation questions, and move on. And I'm a big fan of time boxing, and time boxing is going to be your biggest friend here. Because in Zoom, it's tough to gauge when people are losing interest in the conversation. So it's a good rule to use half of what you used to use. Like let's say if you used to spend 5 to 6 minutes per story to refine it, now use 3 or even 2 minutes. So that way it forces people to be engaged, so the biggest risk for you here is engagement, right? Because you're not in the room, you can't sense what's happening. So that's something to look out for in general, but planning, you really need people engaged. Last 2, retros and demos. Retros, again, there's so many tools online. I'm a big fan of less is more with retros, just me personally. Because as a Scrum Master, I always carry a notebook, you can see, but I always carry a notebook. I'm always jotting down what I'm seeing. If I'm seeing good communication, I make note of it. I write down the situation and then what made it good. And then if I see bad communication or less than optimal kind of communication, I note it down. Because, and this is something one of my mentors taught me early in my career, if you want to build influence with your team, if you want your team to actually believe in the words that you say, they have to trust you and you have to have influence with them. And one of the ways you build influence is consistency, and the other one is being authentic, right? And so when you walk into a room or with your team, if you say good job, right? When you say good job, and let's say you heartfelt and you meant it, that's not going to help you build any sort of credibility with your team or influence. But when you say, I'm just going to use Bob and Susie, those are my standard go-tos. But if you say, Bob, I saw what you did there and how you helped out Susie, even though she didn't ask for it, you kind of were present in that meeting and you offered that information to her, even though she didn't ask for it. It was such a team thing to do, I really appreciate you doing that. That really helped us out. When you are specific like that, and you help them remember when, why, and how, then that helps them see that you were watching, you were listening, and that you were available to them, right? And so that helps build a good reputation for you and an influence with the team. And so that's why I take down copious notes, and you should too, right? And so in retrospectives, I said that to say this: retrospectives should be based on those notes that for the last week, last 4 weeks, 3 weeks. So you should look for something you're trying to improve in your team, right? The worst thing you could do than doing a bad retro is do a good retro for a thing that your team is already good at. Let's say you have a very jovial team that's always communicating, and your Slack channel looks like Twitter, everybody's blowing everything up, but then you run a retrospective that talks about communication gaps. They will first do two things. One, they'll be confused as to why are you talking about communication when we're good at it. And two, and worse outcome is they won't take you seriously because they'll say this guy or gal does not know what they're talking about. They're not a professional Scrum person, right? So take notes. And retrospectives, there are lots of tools. Pick them wisely. Pick a particular pick a particular aspect you're trying to work on, either communication, transparency, respect, whatever, the conflict resolution, people not being clear in the way they communicate, whatever it is, you pick it based on the actual data. Like if I walk in, just imagine if I walked into your retro, if I ask you for evidence for why you ran that retro, you should be able to give me 2 to 3 actual evidence of why you thought that's the right thing to teach. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's very important. And then finally, demos. Demos, Zoom videos are great. Again, this also, typically you could just bring people in, have a conversation. You can't do that anymore. So you have to spend a few minutes on creating a slide deck, 1 or 2 slides, a little bit of a background behind the demo. You run the demo, you facilitate, you bring up that slide and say, this is what you're going to demo, this is the customer, this is the experience you should be seeing, and then turn it over to the developer or whoever is showing the demo. They share their screen, 30 seconds, maybe a minute max, flip back the screen, stop, ask questions. Then you go to the next one. So, free-flowing demos are awesome. I think today, in this particular context, it's very confusing. And if you really care about the customer wanting to come back to your demos, just like you normally would, you have to make it very small, bite-sized, and it has to be extremely well planned. Because I still go to demos that some are really well planned and others I'm just completely lost. Because I see a screen, there are 11 or 12 people on there. I don't know what they're talking about. I don't know who's leading. And they're flipping back and forth between screens. And so I'm going to stop there because I hit my 5-minute mark. So no tool recommendation necessarily for that, just really good process, be prepared, and be the key facilitator for it. Have an agenda, 1 slide for every story or demo that you're going to run. That's that.
Yeah. Thank you for that. No, this was really good. I really like the 3 amigos ideas, and I think I got a comment on that too in the chat window. I think this is really going to help prepare and save a lot of time for team members, plus also reduce all the confusion and chaos that could happen because of not doing that, I guess, right? Reha, do you have anything to add to that?
So no, I think Anand did touch all of the marks. For me personally, I've always put people at the heart of everything. Tools, processes, they're great things, but if you don't have a good team of people, if you don't have a team which trusts each other, I think a lot of things fall out of place, right? So my recommendation is always to Scrum Masters, to RTEs, to product owners, is you have to replicate the team building activities, or you have to replicate that in-person environment you had created, that ecosystem in a remote context. So think about ways in which you're going to build teams, right? I've been a big believer always in keeping retro boards open from the beginning of the iteration, right? There are tools out there. You've got Trello, you've got other tools, or if you are doing like even in Excel for that sake, if you have it open on a shared drive where through the iteration, you've got what went well, what didn't go well, a section for shout outs, just open, right? So in the beginning of the iteration, let your team know the location of that place, because you're expecting people, again, you're thinking from that people aspect, you're expecting people to think about what happened in the past 2 weeks, along with the pandemic shit which is going on at home. That might be too much, right? So have that forum where people can go and jot down their thoughts from the beginning of the iteration. I've created retro boards. And I've shared that login ID, right? It's a single login ID, even on Trello. I've used my email, created one, shared it with the team. And through the iteration, people can just go in every single day and put their thoughts in there, right? On an ongoing basis. Have an area where people can give shout outs. I think that should be part of every ceremony. We get that shout outs in ceremonies, we get that shout outs in hallways, in elevators, right? People come and have conversations. You've got to create that in-person environment online. So how do you do that? Have an area where people can go and post shout outs, with even anonymous shout outs, right?
Have you used the tool for something like that? Like Confluence?
I've honestly, the most basic tool I've used is an Excel file, and I've uploaded it to SharePoint or Confluence.
Nice.
Or created a Confluence page.
I would like to suggest Google Jamboards. It's free if you have I believe it's free. I'm not sure, but Jamboards are basic. It's basically think of it as a PowerPoint slide.
Yeah, I think
that's
you can
open that lets you draw and do stuff to it. So Jamboards, if your company has that, it's a really cool tool because you can just keep adding slides to the right and then
whatever. I want to be tool inclusive, and for the slight sake of VPNs, right, we've got organizations which wouldn't allow access to, say, Google Jamboards or Trello for that reason. So find a way, whatever way your company is collaborating, whether it be MS Teams, whether it be a whiteboard, whether it be Jabber, whether it be Cisco or Google, find a way in which you're able to create that ecosystem where your team can talk to each other, right? I think that's important. I think people are at the heart of everything. That's what everybody should be going and concentrating as Scrum Masters is, how do I build this team, right? Rotate facilitations. I've done that. I encourage Scrum Masters to do so. In person, I've encouraged Scrum Masters not to show up to stand-ups, right? Let people facilitate. In this kind of a setup where we are all remote, probably talk to your team about a working agreement where you can do rotational facilitation, right? It's like Anand had pointed out, it's difficult to keep people engaged in this darn time when people are home, they're behind the cameras, people have cameras turned off. One good way could be that you're encouraging rotational facilitation, right? Asking different people on the team to facilitate the stand-up. It brings that sense of buy-in from people, I think.
Yeah, but I'm assuming you don't just like all of a sudden just not show up, but at least talk to your team before not showing up for the
if you're me, you just don't show up.
Gotcha. All right, good. I think that also leads us to our second question, which is, well, I think you guys talked about it a little bit, is can you give us a few examples of remote working agreements? What would they look like? Like, you probably have done these with your teams.
I think, Rahul, when it comes to working agreements, we've got to be mindful of revisiting them. The ones, if your team had some working agreements when you were an in-person collaborating team, it is important that you should be revisiting them. If you've not already done so, probably use the next retrospective to do so. Revisit your working agreements. Revisit the core hours. If you don't already have core hours for your team, talk about them. Right? I think we'd also touched base on this in the past webinar, but it's important that we show empathy towards people. They're home, their kids involved, and everybody, maybe the 9 a.m. stand-up no longer works for everybody. Maybe a 9:30 is more likely, right? Maybe the 10 to 4 core hours don't work anymore. Maybe we need to get to the 9 to 3 core hours. So those are some of the discussions. At the same time, try and have spaces or try and have a setup or a ceremony in that sense where your team can meet each other, which is not a meeting, which is not a stand-up, or it's not a planning, right? With my team, I do a Friday happy sad hour at 1 o'clock, right? And
Happy
all we
sad hour.
yes, we do a happy sad hour. Because we talk about everything. We bitch about our spouses. We talk about our children. Everything. It's again. It's about creating that hallway conversation. It's that coffee break people take, right? Where you were previously able to go out and grab a cup of coffee and talk about your boss or talk about anybody else for that sake. So encourage your team to do that. Video cameras. Anand had pointed this out in his answer as well. It's a good working agreement to have. It's very easy to kind of get checked out if my camera is not turned on and I'm not checked in. I'm going to be in my pajamas all day. I'm not going to brush my hair. I'm just not involved, right? So it's important that you get that sense of team. The Scrum Master's job is to make strong teams. If they're strong teams, I think the worst of tools work wonders. And if the team does not have trust in them, they're not a strong, performing team, then the best of the tools will not be successful. So I think it's important that you provide those forums. So just revisit your working agreements, talk to your team if there are things which you can do, maybe change the times for certain ceremonies, split them over. A lot of teams have 2-hour-long grooming sessions. Maybe they don't work, right? So maybe you can split them. Instead of 1 2-hour session, we are doing multiple 1-hour sessions, right? So these are the kind of the things Scrum Masters should be mindful of. Anand, in your experience?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll just speak from personal experience. I have a team of Agile coaches and some tech data folks that work part of my team. We all sat within 10 feet of each other, 10, 15 feet of each other. And we did have stand-ups in the morning, but we never had core hours or anything like that, and planning was structured. But now that we're all kind of dispersed, it was tough to get my folks to turn on the camera in the morning at 9:30. And then, I have 2 small children, 9 and 8-year-old. So we homeschool, right? So we're all stuck in homeschooling, like it or not. So we have some agreements. Basically from 10 to 12, I'm homeschooling. That doesn't mean that we are not available. It just means that fully expect my 8-year-old to come in and give me a hug, and then or for him to be sitting next to me and I'm just watching his homework or something when we're having this meeting, right? And so, and it's okay. And as a leader, you have to set the tone to say it's okay. Like, you're a human being, it's okay. Don't shoo your kids out of the room. It's okay. Like, we understand. Like, they need their parents. They see you in the room, they're going to come in, and it's okay. And so that's the only thing I would add. I +1 on all of them. Digital happy hours, we do that. We've got even our CIO to come in and do one every other week. The whole tech community, we have like 400 or 500 people on the Zoom call. We open up a Slack channel. We ask him all kinds of weird things, and he sits and answers it for us. And then he turns the fire on somebody. We'll rag like one of our VPs. We bring them into the conversation. We kind of pull their leg for like 20 minutes. We do all kinds of fun stuff like that. I heard, I've not seen this, but I heard one of my other EVPs over at Capital One. She actually did a 30-minute book reading for the kids. They had like she just brought in everybody brought their kids, like the young children, and she read I think Green Eggs and Ham or something. And so the thing is, like, this is not a bad thing. COVID, yes, of course, but this is a great opportunity for you to really dig in deep and see if you actually believe in these principles, that communication over documentation. Do you believe in it? Now is a chance to excel and show your most creative best.
Agreed.
Absolutely. I think I really like one of your points you guys mentioned, both of you, is no matter what tools you use, if the base, if the core values, or if people don't trust each other, it's not going to be helpful. You can put a lot of time and effort into tooling and running your ceremonies, but if people are not trusting each other, that the team is not going to survive for long.
That's right.
Yeah. All right, cool. Our next question is how important are tools when it comes to remote collaboration? I think you guys already answered that, but do you guys have anything to add to that?
So when it comes to tools, again, working agreements are very important. Now Jira is a collaboration tool. Anybody can go in, fix it. Just have rules around it. If somebody's going to actually change an acceptance criteria, things like that, have them add something in the comments. You have to come up with some rules to say, hey, product person, if I feel like this, we made a mistake or something, then I'll only make changes in the comments section. And then you're always responsible for making the actual edit to the story. You're always responsible for making the actual edit to the feature. You're always responsible for making the actual changes in the roadmap to, when something will get done or not done. So we'll come up with working agreements. There's no perfect tool, just like there's no perfect person. You just have to, you could be really successful and really well managed with sticky notes, and you can be total disarray with Jira Align implemented completely correctly. So it really comes down to how you guys utilize it. I'll stop with that.
I will only add one thing is whatever tool of choice you do have, just make sure your entire team also thinks it's the tool of choice instead of prescribing, right? Most of the organizations have a wide choice of tools. I mean, even for video conferencing, they're going to have multiple, not a single. Larger organizations of 2 or 3, note-taking, unmentioned sticky notes. There are others who might prefer something else. So just make sure whatever you are using, it's a single tool of choice for the entire, a single tool stack actually for the entire team. You've got a single source, you've got a single place where everybody goes. Everybody is comfortable with using the tool. I'll give you an example. In the place I am at, we've got WebEx and we've got MS Teams when it comes to video conferencing. A lot of people are not comfortable with creating channels or joining channels in MS Teams. Yet there are others, the younger lots, who are very comfortable with creating that and working with MS Teams, creating the channels, using it to its full functionality. Virtual backgrounds, for example, right? So they love that tool for that kind of flexibility. We've got the older folks who are not very comfortable. So make sure as a Scrum Master, you are mindful of the tool of choice. And if there is a certain tool of choice and you've got a couple of people who are not comfortable, you're arranging some sort of a training or a brown bag for them. You're not the source of all of the knowledge. Don't burden yourself with that thought that you have to know how every tool works. If you don't, again, it's an impediment in your team.
Absolutely.
Find a way on how you're going to remove that impediment. Maybe somebody else knows the tool, which
Right.
people can work better. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that. So we have one more question left that we had for the webinar. So guys, feel free to put your questions there in the chat and we'll go through them too. But before I ask that last question, I actually want to unmute one of our participants, Alicia. She had some really great points in the chat window, and instead of reading through them, I'm going to actually unmute you, Alicia, so you can talk about that.
Well, let me give you some context real quick. So I am an Agile Tools coach, right?
Nice.
So tools are my thing, my jam. So I'm constantly trying to I'm constantly trying to not force feed people, but like really give them all the skills that they need, right? And to encourage, active exposure and that kind of thing. So I think his name was Anand, right?
Yes.
So he was talking about copious notes. I encourage the RTs and the Scrum Masters, everybody really, that where appropriate in your meetings, open up Jira Align. If you need to add a note to a risk or a note to a ticket, or you need to update it, open up the tool, show it while everybody's looking at it, and add the notes. And that way everybody sees what you're writing, everybody sees the update that's being made, and you eliminate, it's lean, right? No notes means you don't have to circle back, right? And the update is made, everybody sees what's written down, especially like when you're updating dependencies or risks in Jira Align, for example, and maybe the whole team doesn't have that much exposure there. So that's just what I suggest. And again, where appropriate, it doesn't always make sense to, say, open up Jira and update a ticket. Right. But like, if you're making notes of your retrospective or your team meetings or something, you open up Confluence and take the notes there so that everybody kind of sees what's happening. When you're writing your working agreement, open up your Confluence page and talk and type at the same time, so that it's you've got that visual background and everybody's on the same page.
Absolutely.
Yep.
That's it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
It's
thank you. Thank you.
Great feedback.
That's
I
really, really good.
completely agree. And I think, Alicia, this point which you brought up, it's also important from that people aspect, right? Which we keep talking about, building trust, having everybody on the same page, because a lot of times, I know I'm very afraid when I'm sitting in a meeting and somebody's making notes, and it's relevant to the meeting. I don't know what they're typing. When you're, especially, you brought up retrospectives. I think that's a great one. Make notes for everybody, whoever is scribing, usually is the Scrum Master, because it also helps people see what you're thinking and kind of ensure that what you're thinking is along the same lines which people are thinking about, right? And it's trust. It's about building trust. Everybody being on the same page. I so agree.
Yeah. And I think so. One thing I just recently, I guess, realized because I went through it is meeting minutes, at least for me, became so important because at times people are gonna miss your meetings, and that could happen. And then at least like in the times like this right now, when people are not face to face, it's hard to get up to date on what happened in that meeting. So maybe like a quick conference call or some meeting minutes to put somewhere so people can go back and refer to what happened in the meeting, what did they miss.
Great.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
One last question that we had from our audience last time is, can you share some recommendations with our listeners around tools of your choice, especially any of the tools that you have used online?
When it comes to me, I'm very basic when it comes to tooling. Again, my recommendation is going to be just make sure whatever your tool of choice is the tool of choice for your team, and they're able to access it. There's so many tools out there when it comes to collaboration. We spoke about some of them in our previous webinar as well. You've got Miro, you've got the Morals, you've got the Googles, the Jam, you've got the Google Docs for that reason, right? You've got these tools out there. For retrospectives, you've got Fund Retro, you've got polling tools, which are just free out there. My recommendation always is free, right? Go for the free tools.
Yeah.
Don't pay for tools. A lot of these companies offer free trials. They have basic versions of tooling which are available. If your company does not have a collaboration tool, and I think the emphasis here is collaboration, that basically means, for those of you who are not aware, where multiple people can access the same piece of document or artifact at the same time and edit it simultaneously in real time, right? I think that's the intent. So we've got .storming for when you're doing your retrospectives and you'd want to do voting. You've got your Morals and your Miros for the fishbone diagrams. You've got the Jams, or MS Teams has whiteboards to do some collaboration note-taking. Microsoft has OneNote. I've seen a lot of teams use OneNote for note-taking or ceremonies, right? That's that parking lot for stand-ups. So just make sure you are replicating whatever you had in person. Don't do an overkill of tools, in my opinion. It's very important. If you have too many tools you guys are using, people will lose track. And it's just a overkill. Anand?
Okay. So great. So I would like to categorize what Ray has said as the day-to-day collaboration. Like, this is agnostic to whatever the team might be, tech team, non-tech team, could be an HR team. What she says, absolutely true. Our office tools like Microsoft Office 360, that's all you need. Like, you should be able to get that done on Google Docs. We're up and running. I'm going to take a slightly different approach. I'm going to talk about collaboration tools that were built purely for like collaboration, team collaboration. There's a tool called InVision, InVision, InVision. It's not free, but I suppose you could get a free trial on it. InVision, that's right. And so this tool, I was introduced to it during my startup days. And what this tool does is lets you do prototyping really fast, and lets the designers and the developers collaborate on the look and feel, the user experience, and things like that. You can also even send versions of your mock app to your customers, get the feedback on the spot, and in higher versions of it, you can even see them interact. So you can turn on the webcam when they're using the app to track the eyes. You can do a lot of things with this, and it's a great collaboration tool because this is like a true user experience app development collaboration tool. So that's one. InVision, can't say enough nice things about it. There's another company called Blue Agility. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. They have a product out there. Maybe Alicia might know about them. That's similar to, it's basically came out before Jira Align or Agile Craft did a couple of years ago. I was super excited about it. And this particular tool, I believe it interacted with Jira. That if you in the back end, if you wanted it to. And this is also a collaboration tool because you could literally mind map, and I believe Jira Align has that ability now recently. You could actually create a mind map of like story mapping. Like you sit down and say, okay, this is the larger feature, this is how it breaks, this is the larger epic, this is how it breaks down into features, and this is the way we would arrange those features. This small slice will create this value. Let's say you do that story mapping exercise. It lets you do the whole thing virtually or like in digitally. And then in the click of a button, it'll convert all of that into your business epics, smaller epics, features, and even stories all in one push. And then from there, the teams can further refine, the product managers can further refine that into further features. But that original inception collaboration, that large white room diagrams, this particular tool lets you take that whiteboard diagram concept and turn it into some usable seating backlog. And it's a lot of fun to do. Sure, some of that like you might delete right off the bat, but what it does is it helps you capture. A lot of times people forget how complex it was up front. Like people always tend to judge things by what you know today. Like, and so, we should have done that. Well, we know that today, 90 days later, after building, 400 stories and, doing 12 demos, we know that was wrong. But back then, we don't. So Jira, I meant to say, and so these mind mapping tools that capture it, like Jira Align or Blue Agility, they help you see what our initial assumptions were and how we have kind of evolved from that point on. So as an Agilist, it helps you kind of anchor that conversation to say, don't feel bad that this demo didn't go so well because we started 3 months ago and this is what we thought the customer wanted. Actually, this is what they told us they wanted 90 days ago. Now that they've seen a few demos, that they've moved the cheese. So that's my two good collaboration tools that I've worked with. The Blue Agility, I don't have any personal experience. I've only seen a lot of good demos, but InVision I've used extensively, and it's a great user experience and collaboration tool.
That actually just reminds me that a while ago, when we had some distributed teams, like overseas teams, we used to use some tools just for the sake, because people were distributed. There's a tool called Post-it. I don't know if you guys have used that. I think it's like very simple and easy to use. Like especially if you're having meetings and you're writing stuff on your Post-its, and action items or whatnot, you can take a picture of it and it actually transcribes your handwritten stickies to actual posts. And you can send it to your team, etc. There was one more tool which I can't remember what it was, but what essentially did was you put it comes with a device and that connects, it has a Bluetooth USB that connects with your laptop. You put it on your whiteboard. Whatever you write on your whiteboard shows up on your laptop. So if you have team, I know it could be an overkill, but it could be useful in situation where you just you have a lot of diagramming or writing on whiteboards for brainstorming.
That's amazing. So I use Office Lens for that. There's an app called Office Lens.
Office Lens. It's
free. It's a Microsoft app that you can use. That if you take a picture of a whiteboard, it'll flatten it. Like it'll take the image and flatten it, and it might even do some OCR on it. But what the cool thing is, at the end of like a 40-minute conversation, you have like 3 whiteboards full of architecture diagrams, customer interaction models, data models. So you quickly can take pictures of it, make it a PDF, and quickly share it with everybody. So the next meeting, this is key. Next meeting, you come in with those documents printed. So we don't start from zero, but we say, okay, we already talked about the data, we're good. We already talked about the architecture, we're good. Where we got stuck was not knowing who the first set of customers are. So, so then people are able to flip the conversation because people love talking about what they already talked about.
And I didn't know this ever existed. So all this, my life, I wasted my adult life on it.
Taking regular pictures.
Mailing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Alicia did bring up an important point, right? I think Miro and Mural, you can also do all of that same stuff.
Yep.
The free versions of those tools, the basic version of, I think one of them has a basic version, which is absolutely free. You can do those mind maps. You can do your boards. You can have program boards in there. Lots of cool stuff.
If you guys have any questions or if you guys want to share something, I'm going to unmute you, all of you. So feel free to share your experiences. If you have used any tools or, any of that nature, feel free to talk about that.
Hey, yeah, this is Lisa.
Hey, Lisa.
Hey, at my company here in Richmond, we've always been remote. I work with people all across the country, from all the way over in California, Vegas, all the way through the East Coast. So we've always been remote. That's just the way we work. And even for us, this has been a little bit different. And it's been quite interesting because, I have to say that we were getting a little stale with even our remote tools. Like, things were working well, it was going good, but it was getting a little stale. And I'm going to all of these, things like these events and reading things online just to get fresh ideas from people. And it's been really, really enlightening. So I love hearing what everyone else is doing because I've heard some really, really creative stuff. One thing that I can tell you that as a release train engineer that I absolutely loved for facilitating the PI events was a tool called Sococo. Unfortunately, we just got rid of it. Damn, right before this hit, because it was a little costly. So we had, we had it for the enterprise. But if you have an opportunity, go check it out. It was really, really good. And they were really great partners to work with too. They were adding in a lot of features that we wanted. I feel like they still have a little ways to go, but in terms of facilitating a PI event, it gave us that feeling that we were all in the same room together. And as an RTE for facilitation, I could physically see what rooms people were in. And if I needed to go knock on the door and grab somebody for a quick combo, I could just go do that because I knew I had my fingers on the control. Like, I knew where everybody was, what they were doing.
Nice.
And I could, rouse the troops to come back. We've got to come back, all together now. And so it was a super tool, and I really, really.
So Lisa, did it have a video component?
Yeah, it did.
It does.
Yep. One thing it didn't have, but I know that they were trying to add, was a whiteboard capability. It was missing that. So we just, slotted in other things, like you could share your screen. So we would share like on Skype through the Sococo tool. But yeah, I really liked it. But
yeah,
I can't use it anymore. One other thing that I thought of as we were chatting, I would love, like, for all of our meetings to have video. I have found lately, we're using WebEx as our primary. We work really closely with this vendor company, and they use Zoom, and we're both experiencing the same thing. When we get together for the larger meetings, so maybe like 20 or more people, we're all having challenges when we turn our videos on. The tools are just dying out. They're just not cutting it. So we have to say, all right, let's just shut off video for this meeting, and leave it for the smaller meetings, because it's just, I don't know if it's our setup or it's just WebEx and Zoom.
I think we're experiencing the same thing with WebEx. I mean, when you add people, it just shuts down, and we've kind of made an agreement that anything under 10 people will use WebEx. Anything over 10 people, we use Teams.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we just got that. I just literally got it like 2 days ago. I haven't checked it out yet.
Yeah, so they've got a better less bandwidth issue, so we're able to see a lot more people on video. So for our PF planning,
Good.
we use MS Teams instead of WebEx.
Oh, awesome. Great.
Yes.
Awesome. All right, I think that brings us to the end of our podcast today. So guys, just like last time, if you guys have questions or topics that you want to suggest, feel free to reach out to me or and what we will do is after this, probably within a week, we'll try to put like a cheat sheet of all the different tools and stuff like that together, and we'll put it on our website as a blog. From the last webinar, we did put a blog together. If you want to just go and read that, it's like a cheat sheet of virtual PR planning. But also, there's a link that you can click on to watch the recap of our podcast. So that being said, I will see you guys next week. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.